My name is Eric Moody. It looks like I'm going to be in the Warzone today.
Let's get ready to rumble. Step into the war zone. 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 Friday night war zone. Friday night war zone. Hey yo, it's Phil Flames. I'm with Mike on the mic and Joe Morley. About to bring you more heat. Welcome to the war zone. You can have a floor seat. Watch them on your iPhone. Watch them on your Galaxy. It's a sports debate show. Straight up out of SoCal. Gather around the laptop. Friday nights it goes down. And we on the radio. Coming to your locale. Got into the third round. Better bring the smoke now. Step into the war zone. 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 Friday night war zone. Friday night war zone. Step into the war zone. Step into the war zone. Step into the war zone.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the War Zone. My name is Joe Morley, and this is my co-host, Mike on the mic. And you guys might know the gentleman that you just saw right before the credits. This guy is, for you fantasy football fans, he is the staff writer for the Athletic Fantasy page. He's the co-host of the Athletic Fantasy Football podcast, the founder of Moody Fantasy Facts, Mr. Eric Moody.
Wow, that was a really good intro. I was feeling it. I'm in the war zone. I don't know if I need to be, on edge. I may have like grenades, machine guns. I don't know, but I'm doing great. If I were doing any better, it would be illegal. But I'm excited to be here, excited to talk fantasy football with you two fine gentlemen today.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to step in the war zone and talk some more fantasy football. As we were talking about before we started recording, it is never too early to start talking about fantasy football.
Yeah, Eric, I don't know how if you watch the show or not, but Mike always has a thing, and we always say it on this show. When you're talking sports, you always got to be ready to go to war. So you never know what's going to go off.
You're right. You have to be ready.
But let's start off the show with the people that don't know you and want to get to know you and everything about you. So we want to know more about you. Can you tell us a little bit of your background and what got you into sports, and particularly the fantasy football aspect of the sports?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to do that. And so it's hard to believe it has been, I think this will be my 6th year of writing fantasy football content. Like, I've been all over the place. I started at Fantasy Football Locker Room. It's a now defunct website. Spent some time there, had an opportunity to write at Fantasy Pros, RotoViz, Gridiron Experts, Fantasy Data. I've written some pieces for Dynasty League Football. So just a lot of sites, I've likely contributed something to one of them. But I was really excited, a couple of summers ago where I had the opportunity to join the staff at the Athletic. So I know I've reached out to Nando when they originally launched, Jake Seeley, and all the other staff writers there. And I was like, I love what you guys are building. I'd love to have an opportunity, to join the team, whenever there's an opening. And so one thing I learned about Nando, he has like a memory like an iron trap. And so he ended up kind of remembering that and reached out. They had an opening, so I was able to join. I would say outside of fantasy football, I've spent many years in the financial services area. In different roles, whether it's as a financial advisor or a manager. And I know one thing that I've always been passionate about, which kind of directly ties into fantasy football, is always trying to help others. And so that's how kind of those dots ended up getting connected. And so once I joined my first fantasy football league, I was immediately hooked after that. I'll let you know.
Well, I'm going to need your financial advice because I did win my fantasy football league this year. I came up on some money, came up on a belt. So I might need to learn how to. No, I think I've already spent all that money.
You should extend the financial advice out to Joe's favorite team, the Raiders, because Kenny and Drake, huh?
Oh, yeah, that was a rough one. It's nothing like triggering the emotional responses of those who have Josh Jacobs on their dynasty teams, because it really clouds the outlook of both players. They're essentially going to cannibalize each other's value.
Yeah.
And Josh Jacobs needs to stay healthy. I mean, that's going to help him out too. Josh Jacobs needs to go the whole full season with it. But as a Raider fan watching free agency, I put a thing up on my own Instagram that from All American. I'm like, I'm angry. That's how I'm feeling right now. Letting our top guys go, and it's just like I don't know what they're doing. When they signed Kenyon Drake, I was like, okay, what are you guys doing? What are we doing here? So as a Raider fan, I'm not happy with the
Ooh,
yeah,
so sad.
No, understood.
but we don't need to damper the show with Raider talk. You know, it's already bad enough. I mean, I have it behind me, but we don't need to damper it. We'll get into the NFL free agency because it is in full force right now, right? It's what everybody's talking about. It's like the NFL is taking over all 12 months of the NFL of the year now, right? There's no like downtime of the NFL anymore. So, Eric, your thoughts on free agency as it's going right now, and maybe the best fantasy fits that you see.
Yeah, I would say as a whole, I'm like things have gone, very well in free agency. It has been a surprise that there hasn't been some of the bigger name wide receivers, get moved. I know everyone's on pins and needles. They're like, all right, where's Juju Smith-Schuster's going to go? What about Kenny Golladay? All those different receivers. It's like, where are they going to go? But I felt like for the most part, I'm like, from a fantasy lens, the activity's been great, but also like a lot of the moves for some of the fantasy positions, like an offensive line and, a lot of those defensive positions. But I would say, where you asked me what was my favorite free agency signing so far, I'm going to have to think on that for a couple of seconds. I was thinking, you got Hunter Henry, you got Geno Smith, that was good. But my mind kind of immediately kind of thought about Curtis Samuel.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, really like that signing. And I know fantasy football Twitter as a whole sounds like they feel, the same way. Because, we had saw a taste last season on what Samuel can do, when given the opportunities, whether it's as a receiver or, as a rusher. And he delivered. He had some really big fantasy days in PPR formats last season. But I think it helps him and Terry McLaurin joining forces in Washington, because you get someone else that can take some of the defensive heat and attention, trying to make a Warzone reference to you like that, huh? It takes away some of that, that gunfire from Terry McLaurin. So with Samuel and McLaurin linking together is a really good thing. But then you also have Ryan Fitzpatrick under center, and we've gotten glimpses over his career about the good things that he can do to his fantasy receivers. One player that immediately pops into my mind is Devontae Parker, like last year, and what he's been able to do pretty much over the past couple of seasons. But I think it's a really phenomenal signing for Washington, which has major fantasy implications, not only for Curtis Samuel, but also for Terry McLaurin. All positive things.
Yeah, I love that choice. That's what I was thinking too, honestly. And he's a multi-tool player. He gets in the backfield too and takes some handoffs, and he takes some catches out of the backfield. And it's going to definitely take a lot of heat off Terry McLaurin. Like you said, Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be slinging the ball, whether he's throwing it to his team or the other team. He's going to be throwing it, and that's an exciting move.
He's going to be that guy. He's going to be that one guy that we could be like, okay, I can, but I don't know. I'm not going to risk. I don't even know if I want to draft Kenny Golladay this year, because I took him last year and he didn't play. So I'm still kind of staying away from him. But Eric, which team would you want him to go to, the Giants or the Bengals?
Yeah, for Golladay, I'd love to see him go to the Giants for a couple of reasons. Now, I know everyone may have a reaction if you mention, Daniel Jones. We can think of multiple plays, the stumbling over his feet, the interceptions, the fumbles. I get it. But the Giants are obviously confident in his belief. He is going to be, quote unquote, the guy going into 2021. But I also think you have to factor in, like with Saquon Barkley, being injured for the bulk of the season, that takes away something from the offense. So I think Daniel Jones is a really good bounce back candidate, especially if you're a late round quarterback practitioner. I think that bodes well for his value. But imagine this: you got Kenny Golladay. We know what he can do, what he was able to do with Stafford in Detroit. I'm like, you pair him up with a Sterling Shepard, you pair him up with a Darius Slayton. So I think that would be a great fit for a couple of reasons. For one, you get a guy like Golladay, contested catches, yards after the catch. I'm like, he can thrive. You can help Daniel Jones thrive. But also, I think it helps Darius Slayton out quite a bit because he's a really great player, but he's not cut from the cloth to be like a team's number one receiver. And so, again, I think that takes some defensive heat away from Slayton, which will allow him to flourish, and Golladay and Shepard and really that entire offense. So, no, I love that move. If it happens, maybe by Monday it will.
That is the one intriguing thing about the Giants receiving core. They've always had a bunch of like really good wide receiver twos over the last couple of years, but no one that's stepped out and been that wide receiver one. Kenny G would definitely be that one thing. I'm just a sucker for really fun offenses, so I would love to see Cincinnati load up on offense. Unfortunately, their O-line still hasn't gotten very much improvement, but
Yeah.
The receiving core would be loaded at least.
Yeah. I'd say one thing, though, to me, mentioning Cincinnati, one thing I really love about this year's draft class is the depth, like at the offensive line position. I know everyone's enamored and intoxicated by all the different wide receivers that are there, just thinking about it. And that's great, but there are obviously some other positions that can positively impact NFL teams and fantasy teams as well. And so I really love to see the Bengals kind of load up on some O-linemen in the draft. There's some really, really great choices, especially guard tackle. So
yeah, they got to be going Sewell. They got to be in that first pick. That'd be dope.
Yeah, and I keep reading about the offensive line in the draft, about how the first 3 rounds are going to produce so many day one starters that it's going to be great for these teams that are needy. So it kind of helps me out, because especially me being as a Raider fan that let all the guards and stuff go, so we kind of like that. But yeah, I know Joe Burrow's probably sitting back like, hey, can I get some protection this year, please?
Oh,
please. Yes. But hey, we'll move on to another wide receiver. Emmanuel Sanders signed with the Buffalo Bills. He's taking, basically, John Brown is gone now. He's going to be taking that role. Emmanuel Sanders and now Stephon Diggs over there. Do you think that helps Josh Allen a little bit more?
Yeah, no, it's a really good move because, we saw what Emmanuel Sanders could do last year in New Orleans, and we've also seen what he can do for his entire career. I know he's a little bit older, but I think he has a legitimate shot to open this season as the Bills' number 2 receiver. And so he'll be another weapon amongst a plethora of them for Josh Allen to throw to. So I would say on the flip side, one guy that Sanders' presence hurts, unfortunately, is Gabriel Davis. Now, he was a guy going into the season that I was very, very high on. So it's obviously going to negatively impact his possible breakout campaign. Then on the flip side, too, just to kind of give some additional analysis, you look at the Saints for where, they lose Emmanuel Sanders. They're obviously going to reload with Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston under center, which will be a very intriguing battle to watch. But I think it also opens up the door for Traquan Smith, too, is a under-the-radar breakout candidate. He answered the bell last season when needed, whether it was when Emmanuel Sanders was out or Michael Thomas. And so he's another guy that was just ridiculously effective with the targets that he was given, if you look at different advanced metrics or whatnot. So that's another guy on the flip side that I'm really high on.
And Jared Cook exiting that offense as well. That opens up some targets for some Saints wide receivers. I think it does help out Josh Allen a lot. This Bills offense already was a big play style offense, and Emmanuel Sanders is a big play style wide receiver. I've always enjoyed Emmanuel Sanders' game. Now, I don't think Emmanuel Sanders is going to go out and be a solid wide receiver 2 in fantasy every week, but he definitely could be a guy you could fill in during certain matchups when the Bills are probably going to go off on a poor or lesser secondary.
Yeah, no, good points. Like if the Bills, if they do open up the season with Emmanuel Sanders as their number 2, he'd definitely be on the fantasy wide receiver 3 radar. To your point, great offense. I think they ranked 4th in total yards per game last season. Another nugget that popped into my head while you were speaking is that you look at the Bills. I'm like, they ranked first in 3+ wide receiver sets last season, and second, I believe, in 4+ wide receiver sets. I think that was from a Sharp Sharp Football Analysis, just with that nugget. And so, like, multiple receivers can thrive in that offense.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and we're not even talking about Beasley up there, who's probably one of the underrated wide receivers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's going to help him out a lot. Diggs going over there was a lot, but they still need a running back. They still need to do something in Buffalo. But Emmanuel Sanders, just think about it. Emmanuel Sanders was a catch away if Jimmy G would have just hit him from the Chiefs not winning that Super Bowl a couple years ago. So
yeah,
he helps teams. He helps. That's all he does. He goes and helps a team. I'll stick with wide receivers because I have another one, and I like this wide receiver. I thought this was a great signing. I thought it was not an underrated signing because people are talking about it because it is a New York market. But Corey Davis to the Jets, I think that's a good signing. I don't know who the quarterback's going to be there. What do you think about Corey Davis?
I'll attack that one first in the Warzone. So I really like the signing because I looked at how much guaranteed money that they had on the deal. It was like $27 million. And so it's just simple math. If I'm going to pay someone $37.5 million, and I'm going to guarantee 27 of it, I'm like, that's an individual that's going to get a lot of targets and opportunities. Yeah. And so I think you'll see a steady dose of targets. You got Jamison Crowder there. You got Denzel Mims. And I'm like, you look at Davis, I'm like the former Titans receiver, had really the best season of his career last year. 65 receptions, a little bit under 1,000 receiving yards. He had like 5 touchdowns. And he also set a career high in catch percentage. It was 70.7%. And another statistical nugget, I'm like, he had a passer rating of 123.6 when quarterbacks targeted him. And so I think he's in a really good position to see targets, have his first 1,000 yards or more season. The quarterback situation, we'll see what happens there. Is it going to be Deshaun Watson? Is it going to be Sam Darnold? What that's going to look like. But I think he can be viewed as a solid wide receiver 3 with upside in fantasy. The quarterback situation will dictate on how high of a ceiling he has, in my opinion.
Yeah, imagine the steal you get if you draft Corey Davis late in the draft, and then like a week before the season's about to start, or during preseason even possibly, you hear the news that Deshaun Watson goes there. The Jets haven't made any strides to like start leaning towards run first, so I assume they're going to be a pass first offense still. So Corey Davis is probably going to thrive. He's definitely going to be the first or second best option in that offense to go to through the air.
Yeah. I would say something else too. Just kind of looking at the flip side of things with the Titans with losing a guy like Davis. I'm like this transaction like positions like AJ Brown to be a beast. To see like 120 or more targets. I'm like, one thing that's interesting, like he stockpiled like a 35% target share in Tennessee's final 5 games last season. And so we saw what he was capable of over that span of time. So I'm like, that's a guy, I'm still kind of updating ranks, but I'm like, that's a guy I see is easily a top 6 fantasy wide receiver based on this news. So
yeah, there is no dynasty AJ Brown owners rooting for Tennessee to go after any of these receivers. They are okay with this going the way it's been going. AJ Brown is a beast, and he is going to take that stride.
I'm excited to see what he can do on his own, but whoo, AJ Brown, get that ball. Let's go. Like you have to be happy that if now you're looking at drafting him early and you're looking at the great production that he's going to put in. You got to be happy with that.
So I'm like, are they going to put him on the outside or Juju, or just move Juju to the slot? But then you wonder, where's that going to leave like Jamison Crowder, for where I would still have a similar outlook if they end up doing that. But it just comes down to what's Juju's contract looks like. I just tend to try to chase the money for a portion of the analysis, because you're not going to pay someone that much guaranteed money to not get your money's worth. But I think both of those two players, can coexist. I think their ceilings really come down to if Darnold takes the next step forward, or if they get like Deshaun Watson or someone. But yeah, that would be an intriguing scenario.
Scheme wise, that helps out the Jets a lot as far as getting more wins on the board. But fantasy football wise, that will be a little bit tough on Corey Davis, because I don't think Corey Davis has established himself as a wide receiver 1 on a team yet. So I don't know how that would play. Would Juju become the wide receiver 1? Like you said, it's a tough situation because they just gave Corey Davis big money.
Yeah.
This is how much fantasy football changes the game, right?
Yeah.
Or changes our opinion of the game. Like we look at the free agent signing and we go, oh, it's a good fit for the team, but fantasy wise, that's not going to help me. So he shouldn't have gone there. Like Kenyon Drake signed with the Raiders today, and like, nope, that kills Kenyon Drake's value. Why are we doing that? People are so mad at the free agent signing just because of fantasy value that they're not looking at how much it's going to help that team win.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought it was a little bit funny. Well, hey, being a past financial advisor, maybe there was a team that you should have helped out this offseason was the New England Patriots, who went out there and just handed out like they backed up the Brinks truck and said, hey, we're giving away. Anybody wants to come get. I mean, when you give Nelson Aguilar $13 million a year, I guess you just have money to throw away, right? Because I know he didn't catch that bag when they threw it to him.
Oh, that was good. I can touch on this. Since you mentioned the Patriots, I may be kind of long-winded on this one because there's a lot of players to hit on. You got Cam re-signing, and like you got Juno Smith, you've got Hunter Henry and the receivers. But I'll do my best to succinctly dive into each player and provide some analysis. So to your point, Patriots entered free agency is one of the leaders in salary cap space, and so Bill Belichick and company didn't want to waste time on going on a spending spree. So first domino to fall, Cam Newton. wasn't a surprise to me. I'm like, he was a QB7 in fantasy from week 1 to week 3 last season. His production was really fueled by his rushing touchdowns. He did miss time due to COVID-19. I know he's been public about, hey, this has kind of had an impact on me. We could see it. He struggled to return to form. He led the NFL last season in rushing touchdowns, but overall, he only averaged 177 passing yards per game. Patriots were very run heavy. That could have been dictated by the supporting cast that he had around him, which resulted in this lovely free agency spending spree. But another thing too is that with his contract, I'm like, it's very, very interesting. So Newton's going to have to really, really play to get paid, I guess is the best way to put it. Looking at some of the info, like he'll get $5.1 million if healthy, and he's on the roster as a backup. He can earn up to $6.6 million if he starts all season, and $8.6 if he starts. Patriots make the playoffs. Again, they missed the playoffs last year. They're very upset about that, I'm sure. It's not part of their culture. Then on top of that, you have to go watch your old quarterback Tom Brady go win a Super Bowl with his new team. So the salt is very heavy in New England right now with Belichick, I'm sure. And so Newton could basically make $13.6 million based on all these additional incentives. So they surrounded him with weapons, which is a good thing. And Newton, with his rushing ability, is another, late round quarterback to target, who can outperform his draft position. So you look at the 2 tight ends. You got Geno Smith, you got Hunter Henry. If you were to ask me, I'm like, hey, which one of these guys do you want to target? For me, it's really Hunter Henry, because if you look at the Patriots just as a whole, I'm like, over the last 2 seasons, I'm like, they've only accumulated 87 targets, 55 receptions, 673 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns from tight ends. The Jets were the next worst team if you look at those different stats and everything there. So with Henry, I'm like, he's going to be the guy that's going to be used as a receiver. He's going to get a ton of targets. But if you look at Geno Smith, he spent a high number of snaps blocking, as a blocking tight end. He'll get targets here and there, but I think Hunter Henry is going to be the guy. So if you were to, I know a lot of people are talking about, is this another Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez situation? That could be the case. Obviously, Cam Newton's not Brady, but if you were looking at those two, which I think is a fair comparison, obviously Hunter Henry's in the position to be the new Gronk. With the 2 receivers, I'll kind of close on that, where you've got Nelson Agholor and you've got Kendrick Bourne. I'm like, with Agholor, it makes a lot of sense. I'm like, this is a guy that had a ton of receiving air yards last year, 1,259. He's a guy he can work from the slot. He can work on the outside. And so they're looking for someone that can threaten defenses vertically. He fits the bill. I'm like, he scored 6 touchdowns on his 11 deep passes, according to Pro Football Focus. Only other receiver of more touchdowns was Tyreek Hill. You look at Kendrick Bourne, I'll kind of close on him, is that everyone is like thinking, oh yeah, Cam Newton's going to thrive with Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Agholor. But if you dive a little bit deeper, I think you can see why they make the move. I'm like, Bourne has like an innate ability to make like clutch receptions. He showed that quite a bit in San Francisco. I'm like, the only other 49ers receivers with more career touchdown receptions on throws from Garoppolo was tight end George Kittle. I'm like, last season, 71.4% of Bourne's 49 receptions went for first downs. But this is a guy that they can use. Hey, we need 5 or 6 yards. Bourne can be the guy to make that clutch reception. I'm like, he's versatile like Agholor. He can run out wide. He can play from the slot. But something else that I noticed when diving a little bit deeper, just once this news took place, is that you look at Bourne's 3-cone drill time. It was 6.73. Which is eerily similar to the current wide receiver, Julian Edelman. We've seen the type of career and success that he's had in New England, but also eerily similar to Deion Branch as well. And we know about how vital he was for Tom Brady earlier in his career. And so that's the type of short area quickness that Belichick covets. So I think both of those guys from a fantasy lens are worth targeting late in drafts as flyers, not guys that I'm rushing out to get. But if you're in the double-digit rounds looking for someone with some upside, they should be on your radar.
Yeah, this Patriots offense is going to be a lot of fun to monitor and watch and see how it evolves throughout this season, throughout this offseason, even as they go into the preseason and stuff like that, what we see them roll out with in the preseason. Just because I feel like a lot of it also had to do with last year, Cam struggling after getting COVID, of course, getting COVID, however that affected him. But I also think that the Patriots had to really dumb down the offense that they probably would want to run this year with these kind of weapons, just because 1, like you said, lack of weapons, and 2, Cam Newton signed a couple weeks before the season was about to start. There wasn't
Yeah.
that much time to get prepared and really put an offense around him. I think that what they're doing is they're going to kind of meet in the middle between Cam and what Bill Belichick's offense looked like for the last 20 years with the 2 tight ends and always going to the tight ends in the big moments. And I think that that's what Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry are going to be for the Patriots. In those big play moments, they're going to look for those guys in the red zone. They're going to look for those guys. Hunter Henry is one of the better red zone tight ends in the league, has some of the best hands out of tight ends in the league. So I would be looking at Hunter Henry as a possible tight end option. Those guys are getting paid number 3 and 4 now, I believe, or maybe it's 4 and 5 in the league on the same team. So that's definitely an interesting dynamic to monitor as well. Like you said, chasing the money to see which team is going to be going for who as their featured guys in the offense. I also am interested in Cam Newton. I'll be okay with getting Cam Newton really late in the draft and just have, my mind open to change if I need to, but there's a chance that he could break out this year and go back to something that we're used to seeing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. To his point, I'm like, we saw what Cam Newton was able to do with Greg Olsen back in Carolina. So it's not like he doesn't have a history of throwing to tight ends successfully,
See, and I think you brought up a good point, Eric. And the Patriots only had three touchdowns from their tight ends the last couple of seasons. Now they're getting 2 guys that equal 26, 27 touchdowns. The red zone targets is what they want. They want those guys when they get down to that red zone to be able to score and take a little bit of pressure off of Cam Newton. And if you got those, maybe we could see the old Cam just a little bit, the old guy who runs into the, we saw it in week 1 through 3, like you said, where he was running and getting those touchdowns. But then they realized, hey, that's all they have. We stop Cam and they have nobody else. So now you got these guys that are going to open it up a little bit more for Cam as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a 9, 10, maybe even 11 win team right now without the draft and without any more free agency additions. Because I am definitely looking at the Patriots defense, any of those defensive entrepreneurs.
I still don't draft. I don't know. Something about defenses and quarterbacks I can't draft still high. I don't know why. Some people I seen defenses go as high as like 7th, 8th round last year, and I'm like, nope.
Opportunity cost.
Like, what are you guys doing? I can't do it, but we'll move on. Hey, why not? This guy was high last year, and I think I took him first pick of the 2nd round of my draft. I ended up trading him. I didn't hold on to him all year, but Clyde EdwardsHelaire is now looking like going to be the number 1 guy in Kansas City, right? They brought in 2 offensive linemen, and Tooney and Kyle Long's back out of retirement. So they're kind of helping that offensive line, what they need. Williams is out now. They released him. So CEH, is he going to be finally the guy?
Yeah, I believe Clyde EdwardsHelaire will end up being the guy. You've got a couple of moving parts, like you mentioned, which help him. For one, he's got Damian Williams that's not on the roster anymore. So you don't have in the back of your mind, I've got who should have been the Super Bowl MVP, Super Bowl hero, Damian Williams behind me. And so you've got that weight kind of taken off of Clyde EdwardsHelaire. And also, too, he's gotten acclimated to the NFL game. I'm like, he didn't have a true transition last year, to NFL life, just due to COVID and not having a preseason. And so I think he'll actually be able to deliver on the hype that we had for him last season in 2021, because they're positioning it for him to be, the guy. Damian Williams gone. You've got, Darrell Williams who signed with a 1-year deal. You've got him there. So he's positioned to break out. But I would also say this, I'm like, you don't want to discount like a player's progression from like one season to the next, especially rookies from their first season to their second season, So I think he's really positioned to do some big things in that offense. So.
Yeah, he shot up the boards last year, almost at a ridiculous rate. I saw him going in the 2nd round in a lot of drafts. Mm-hmm. I'm not ready to put that kind of confidence where he's going to be my RB1 yet, but definitely an RB2 or even a flex.
Mm-hmm. And what he did against Buffalo last year, that all those out there, because I can brag about it, because the Raiders did beat the Chiefs last year, and then the next week the Chiefs went to Buffalo and they pounded the ball, and CEH had 170 yards, and we're like, oh, here it goes. This is what we're talking about. This is why we drafted him, and then it went back to nothing. So hopefully, if we can get that middle of that, like from the bad part to the good part and just put them in the middle where we're getting 90 to 110 yards a game, I'll take that. But like you said, I don't know if I'm going to take that chance of taking them high again.
Yeah, I'm not completely sold on him because, like you said, it is different from college to go to the NFL and play 16, possibly 17 games in a season. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I've heard murmurs. Is that official yet that they're going to go to 17 games and when they're going to do it?
Yeah, last I heard, they're still kind of talking through it. I guess weighing like the pros and cons, but it sounds like it's inevitable. Like it'll end up happening sooner rather than later. Those are the vibes that I've gotten from what I've read.
That would be crazy.
Great. So now we can go 8-9 instead of 8-8.
And all the records getting broken, baby. Every record.
But it does mean one more week of fantasy football, right?
Yeah,
it does.
It does.
It does.
Like, yeah. One more week so you could vie for that one last playoff spot for another week if you're fighting. Eric, some big stories going on in this offseason, and we've touched on it just a little bit when we were talking about the Jets. The Bears and the Texans are like all offseason, it's been quarterback. They're going to get quarterbacks. One of them is going to trade it, and the other one's going to get a quarterback. People thought Russell Wilson was going to go to Chicago. They got all excited, and they get Andy Dalton. And they still have Nick Foles on the Mitchell Trubisky just signed with the Buffalo Bills, so he's gone. He's off that market. He's not going back to Buffalo. It finally seems like Houston is kind of on the going, okay, we finally know that we will trade him at one point. What do you think we end up with these quarterback situations in Houston and Chicago?
I guess I'll start with the Bears, and I'll pivot to the Texans. So, I guess the Bears were clearly unsuccessful in their very aggressive pursuit of Russell Wilson, so it didn't happen. So, the consolation prize, Andy Dalton. Nothing that's going to get you really excited. He filled in for Dak last year. Dak's injury. Dalton had 2,170 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, in his one season in Dallas. From a fantasy lens, we've seen what he can do with his time in Cincinnati. He had some really successful, fantasy seasons there. But I'd just be shocked on the Bears side of things if Matt Nagy and general manager Ryan Pace, just given, I guess, their situation, they're on the hot seat. I'd be really shocked if they don't trade up in the draft to acquire a quarterback. But if they are going to go to war this season with Andy Dalton, I think Dalton could easily be on the QB2, radar, for those that are in Superflex 2 QB leagues, just given the weapons that he has. You've got Allen Robinson. We know his statistical body of work and what he can do. Darnell Mooney, one of my favorite wide receiver breakout candidates. Then you've got, tight end Cole Kmet. Hopefully I pronounced that okay. Mm-hmm. And with the Texans, they're finally starting to come to reality that, hey, Deshaun Watson's not going to be around. And then you've got some of the off-field stuff that has come to light where the timing on that is just very odd, for that to come out. And so, who knows what's going to happen with that situation. You never like seeing, that type of news flow surrounding a player and then the other people involved. That's as far into it as I'll go. I don't know too much about the whole situation. But I think it's telling whenever the Texans did sign Tyrod Taylor to was a 1-year contract, I believe, right? 1-year deal.
Yeah, I think it was 2.
Okay, yeah. Was it 2 or was it 1?
No, that's 1. I'm pretty sure.
Let me check. Yeah, it was a 1-year deal. Looks like it's worth up to $12.5 million with the Texans. So they acquired him. Obviously as an insurance policy for Deshaun Watson on whether he comes back or not. It's really been years since Taylor's seen some legit snaps. You think back to 2017, he averaged around 17 PPR, or not necessarily for quarterback, fantasy points, we'll say, per game. He finished like a QB1 in 47% of those games that season. That was a year where he led the Bills to a playoff berth. And so he's shown, what he's capable of, with the right supporting cast. So, again, that's a guy that may be a matchup-based streamer if that comes to fruition, if he does open the season as a starter. But, kind of thinking about the Texans too, it's like, how about that running back situation that they have? Doesn't that make you just want to hurl a little bit? You got Mark Ingram and David Johnson.
It's like, yeah. I'm with you. Tyrod Taylor season. What's up? Let's go. Let's get this going. Let's get Tyrod Taylor up there. Hopefully Houston doesn't have the same doctor that the Chargers have. And I'm not supposed to go there. Too far? Too far right there?
No, it's not too far. It's just I just from playing, because I played college football too. It's like an offensive lineman. It's just kind of frustrating to kind of see a scenario like that. It's like my season is like derailed, because of the team physician. That's the thing that really irks me with it. We can go there. That's fine. I just hate that, that happened, to a guy like Taylor, but it looks like he'll have a shot of redemption this year in Houston. So that's all.
And
Mike likes it.
Yeah, he's a guy. Well, I mean, what resulted, we had no idea was going to happen with Justin Herbert. Okay, I just want to point that out. I'll say that's Anthony Lynn's fault that Justin Herbert wasn't starting from the get-go. We'll just go with that. But yeah, it sucks it happened to Tyrod, because Tyrod also is such a great guy. He was the captain of the team still the whole year as the backup quarterback, because the team respected him that much. And the Chargers, I think, were fully prepared to play 16 games last year with Tyrod Taylor as the starter. I don't think they had anything else in their mind other than that Justin Herbert was going to be rolled out this year, which is crazy. Who knows what our offseason would look like in that case? Now the pressure's on, now that they know what they have in Justin Herbert. But as far as like the QB situation in Houston, I could see whoever they trade with, they acquire a quarterback also. So whether it's Denver, they possibly get Drew Lock in the deal, or whether it's Chicago, they possibly get Andy Dalton in the deal. I'm not sure what his contract looks like for being traded in his first couple weeks on the team, but possibly that could happen. I also am keeping an eye on Seattle, because I think that team is doomed right now. Other than the receivers, other than Russell Wilson, they need basically someone at every other position. Maybe you could say linebacker, they're good, but those guys are aging as well. Seattle's a team that I look at, and I think that if Russell Wilson wasn't the quarterback of this team, they'd be going into a rebuild. So I really could see it, and it's a hot take, and I've been saying it over the last couple of weeks, and probably like the last week. I could see the Seahawks being, 1-4, 2-3, 2-4, something like that, and we see the blockbuster deal mid-season. Very rare. Very rare, but this is a situation where I could see the Bears and the Seahawks both stinking and finally giving in and doing that trade, especially if they're willing to offer what they were offering. 3 first-round picks and 2 starters. I'm just assuming that those starters was a defensive lineman, possibly Khalil Mack or Akeem Hicks, or both, and probably one of those receivers, just based off what Seattle might be wanting.
Hey, I know we were talking about the Texans. The Texans, why wouldn't you want to be a quarterback? I know people hate on the organization and you don't know what they're going. The head coach, but that offensive line is getting shored up down there. They just brought in Marcus Cannon to be the opposite of Jeremy Tunsil. So they have 2 bookend offensive tackles. So if you want to be a quarterback down there, it's going to be good. And right now, like you said, if they get rid of Deshaun Watson, if he's gone, now you have Tyrod Taylor. Who else are you going to bring in? Are the Raiders going to squeeze Mariota out of there? And now he can probably have another chance there. And Tyrod Taylor and Mariota got it. I don't know. I think we all love to find that one team and talk crap about and beat on that organization. But the Texans, like you said, I think they're quietly doing some stuff. With Watson or not, I don't know how great that play calling is going to, how good that coach is going to be, but they're quietly putting a good team together. And like we made fun of the running backs, but if Mark Ingram and David Johnson can get back to their form and they could just do that nice 1-2 punch, I'm just saying if they can. I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying if they can, it could be quite a duo down there.
Yeah, the thing that really just irks me, like with the backfield, like when you got Mark Ingram and then David Johnson, is that it's another one of those scenarios where they're going to like cannibalize each other's value. Because I know David Johnson took a pay cut, obviously to stick around with the Texans. He averaged 16 opportunities per game last season, and Ingram's coming off of like a career worst season, like his lowest rushing yardage of his career, 299 yards and 2 touchdowns. And so I just think the presence of both just really diminishes each other's value. That's all. Like I would feel a lot more comfortable about David Johnson if they didn't sign like a guy like Ingram. Yeah, it's just not going to be the ideal situation, but not bad best ball candidates, I suppose. If you can embrace the volatility. But
what about Brandon Cooks? You like him down there?
No, I do, and with having a guy like Brandon Cooks like on the team, I know he does have a concussion history, and I know that concerns a lot of people. But I'm like, with his presence there, kind of made Will Fuller like expendable in a way for the Texans. And then with his, positive test, didn't help either. So that was kind of the final nail in that coffin. But no, I do like Cooks. I think he can really thrive with whoever they have like under center there. So if Tyrod gets the nod, I'm perfectly okay with that. And with Cooks, I like him quite a bit. And then also Kiki Kuti. That's another receiver that I think can find himself getting more targets and more opportunities. And he was ridiculously efficient last season with the targets that he did receive. I believe he had a positive receiving fantasy points over expectation, which is a good sign. All he needs is really more targets, more consistent targets to thrive. So, it's not the ideal offense, just a target like in fantasy, but there's always some opportunity and chaos. And so those are some players on the team that I like.
And sometimes garbage points are the best points, right? When you find a team
that's
always down and always getting beat and you got their best players, hey, garbage points, hey, they still count. They're still points. I don't care what you say. Garbage points are great in fantasy.
They count. Absolutely.
Mike's over there going, no, they don't.
I was about to say the same thing. Matthew Stafford has made a living off of that garbage time.
Why not? Why not get those guys that are always down? And hey, why do you think Matt Ryan's always up there, right? Matt Ryan's always in the top 10 because of stuff like that, because they're always coming back. They're always doing that. I know I forgot to mention one guy, Eric, and I can't do it. I can't have you on the show and not talk Charger football because Mike loves the Chargers and he always tries to sneak it into the show somehow. So Corey Linsley, the best free agent center in the NFL, signed with the Chargers this offseason. The Chargers are making it known that they want offensive linemen, that they're trying to help the young quarterback, Justin Herbert, right? So Justin Herbert had a great year. I had him on my fantasy league. I won my fantasy league with him.
Yeah.
What are we looking at his value next year?
Oh, with the guy like Herbert, or just with the offensive line in general, or both?
Well, do you think that what the additions of the offensive line, if it's going to help him, and where would you put Herbert in terms of fantasy quarterbacks next year?
Yeah, I would say the offensive line addition obviously helps. I know that Herbert was which was surprising, like for a rookie. I'm like, he was very productive, like under pressure last season. If you look at the film, but if you also just look at some of the data over Pro Football Focus, I'm like he was very, very productive under pressure. And so if you add on another offensive lineman to kind of strengthen that, and with the center is really key in calling the protections and all those other items. And so I think that's a win-win. So he gets cleaner pockets, which should only help his fantasy value. But looking at Herbert himself from a fantasy lens, I'm looking at him as a top 6 quarterback. I'm like, but the weapons that he has there, I'm like, you got Austin Eckler. I'm like, he's lethal as a runner, lethal as a receiver out of the backfield. Like you got Keenan Allen, who's a route running, dynamo. I'm like, he's going to get open. And then you've got Mike Williams. I'm just curious to see what other receiving additions that they add in free agency. But also you've got some other receivers too. They're going to escape me. Help me out, guys.
I got Guyton, Tyron Johnson.
Guyton, yeah, and Johnson. Yeah, they were solid last year too. I'm like, they both had positive receiving fantasy points over expectations. So, you give those guys additional targets. I'm like, they can thrive. So, no, I'm really high on Herbert, I guess is my main takeaway.
I 100% agree with you, and call me a homer. Call me a homer, Joe. Go ahead. Chargers fan likes Justin Herbert. Go figure.
Hey, I'm not calling you a homer because check this out. I always got to bring it out. This is my championship belt right here. This is my championship belt, and Justin Herbert is on there. He's somewhere on there. I put him right here. He's on my rookie scorer.
There he is.
Justin Herbert. I always got to show this off because, hey, when you win a championship, you got to show it off. I know some of my league mates are watching, and I go, hey, I won, just to let you know.
Yeah, and he's on that belt because Justin Herbert had the greatest rookie quarterback season statistically ever. And that's ridiculous to think about. And he did it with a bottom 5, maybe even bottom 3 offensive line. Keenan Allen in and out of the lineup. Mike Williams in and out of the lineup. Hunter Henry in and out of the lineup. He did it with Jalen Guyton and Tyron Johnson being his primary receivers in a lot of games. It was extremely impressive. And to see what I was looking out for was, one, the offensive line, which they addressed that. And the other thing I was looking out for is what was going to happen with Mike Williams' contract situation.
Yeah.
The Chargers now fully guaranteed owe him $15.6 million. It's $16 million roughly. But leading into it, there was a lot of rumors that he was going to get traded or cut or something to get them out of that problem. Extended would have been the best option, but none of the above happened, and they're going to be paying him $16 million. So that's big news for people who are in on Justin Herbert. Before that, I was thinking around QB8, QB9, but definitely top 10. Now that I know Mike Williams is going to be there and he's going to have that consistency at the wide receiver position, I'm ready to go ahead and say top 5 quarterback, or like you said, QB6. I'm ready to get Herbert in there.
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge with having Mike Williams back. And, who knows? I'm like, this wide receiver class in the draft is really deep, and they can even add on, someone else as well. So, no, exciting times. Yeah,
and they picked up Jared Cook, too. So it's not like there's a huge hole at tight end now for Hunter Henry's missing. I would rather have Hunter Henry than Jared Cook, but Jared Cook can provide some help, especially in the red zone.
Yeah, and you got Donald Parham there, too. So you got some weapons.
I love Parham, but I just got to ease the brakes on him. I know he's a developmental piece, but I love Parham as a fan.
Oh, yeah.
All right, before we go, Eric, I'm gonna hit you with one last question. This is gonna be. We don't have to hold you to this one. It's early. All right, Eric. So if you had the number 1 pick, it doesn't matter what if it's standard PPR. It doesn't matter what league you're in. You got the number 1 overall pick in the fantasy football draft this year. Who are you taking?
Oh wow, the number 1 overall pick. Oh, number 1 overall pick. You know what? I'm going to have to go with Patrick Mahomes. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding there.
I was like, whoa, okay.
Well, you're like, whoa, it's going to be a hot topic in the comments or on the pod. But yeah, I would say, like, in all seriousness, it's tough for me to move away from like Christian McCaffrey. Just given when he's healthy, the opportunity share, that he's had like on a per game basis. And if you look at his fantasy point production, especially in PPR formats on a per game basis, they paid him a lot of money, with that monster contract. He's going to be the engine that propels, that offense. And he's shown that regardless of who's under center, like he can be very, very productive with whoever that is. And so I would still go with Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I probably would go with Christian McCaffrey also. I just think that every other candidate to be that number 1 pick, which I think is Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey, but you got the worries of Derrick Henry just one day, it's just not going to be the same. And who knows when that's going to happen. It's just his style of play. He's a power bruiser style running back. They don't last long in the league. And he's going to go from a 2,000-yard rusher to a 1,000-yard rusher in one season. It's going to happen. You just don't know what's going to happen. I feel like CMC has a lot less risk of his running back cliff coming, just because he's so versatile.
I would say that another guy, I'm like, it's tough. It's really close would be like a Dalvin Cook. Yeah. Like we've all seen what he's been able to do, in that zone blocking scheme, which he'll still, continue to run that system, which is great. I would say the only downside of the guy like Cook would just be his availability, and not because, hey, he's going to get hurt. It's just, the Vikings did a phenomenal job, with Alexander Mattison and the other backs they have on the roster with managing his workload. So if a game is firmly in their control, they're like, hey, we're not going to risk it. We're going to pull Cook. So I would say that's really the only downside to drafting Cook, but it's really, really close for me between those two guys.
I'm going Travis Kelce, number 1 overall. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I wanted to be like him too. I just wanted to throw it out there, see what you guys thought.
Make an argument for it.
You can make an argument. Like we had Marcus Grant on last week, and he said that Travis Kelce is probably going to go in the first round, if not top 5. He goes, he would feel comfortable taking him number 5 overall. That's how he felt. So Travis Kelce's going to get us. But I'm more you. I'm the old school way. I'm more running back. I always go running back. That's my way. And right now, I've been leaning towards Derrick Henry just because of what he's done. And I know he doesn't get the catches as much as we would like, but he puts up those yards and he puts up those touchdowns, and that's But you did make a great case for CMC, and so it got me thinking again, like, okay, if CMC is completely healthy and he goes back to form, yes, I could see it. So I think those are the two guys that I would be arguing over in my head. But Derrick Henry, since he won my fantasy league for me this year, can I throw that out there just one more time? Hey, selfless plugs. It always helps, right? That Derrick Henry is my man. I'll take him number 1 no matter what I'm in right now.
Yeah, It's like you mentioned. It's like you mentioned that it's like that it's old school, but yeah, I would respectfully disagree. It's just I'm like it just makes sense. I'm like if you've got like an early pick that way, I'm like opportunity share for running backs. I'm like it's scarce. It's a mad world out there, as like Tears for Fears would say. I'm like you got Christian McCaffrey. I'm like his workload's locked in. Dalvin Cook. You got Derrick Henry, and then you got Saquon Barkley. Then after that, it gets a little spotty. There's some concerns about Ezekiel Elliott with Tony Pollard. If he'll end up taking some of his opportunity share away. But then you got Jonathan Taylor. They bring in Marlon Mack back. Who knows what that's going to look like? You got Nick Chubb. You got Kareem Hunt there. Aaron Jones could be one to kind of elevate himself with that contract that he's getting. Even though you've got AJ Dillon that's there. We talked jokingly about Josh Jacobs like earlier. We saw what happened there, and so you got to go where the touches are at, right?
Antonio Gibson might be a name to watch out for if he could stay. Now with the additions like we talked about, with the addition of Curtis Samuel and all them, it might give him a little bit more running room. But like you said, there's 4 or 5 top guys, and then we're like, oh, okay, now I'm going to take my risk. Is Miles Sanders going to be okay? Is so-and-so going to be we're wide receiver, you'd be like, okay, I feel comfortable taking later. I feel comfortable with Emmanuel Sanders being my number 3 wide receiver on my team. I'll draft him later. So you're not – you've always seen it where the people that go wide receiver heavy first, it's like, okay, now who's your running back? You just lost your season.
Yeah, it's I know we're kind of talking on running backs. I'll make one last point. It's looking like it, ADP and kind of where guys are going and just perception. Yeah, I would say one guy that continues to be like overlooked is Joe Mixon. I'm like, just imagine being able to get him in like the late first, early second round. Pairing him up if you go running back. I'm like, that could be big.
That's what I love to do. I love to go running back, and then if one of the top-notch tight ends are available to me in the second round, I'll think about it, like one of the top 3, Kittle, Waller, or Kelsey. But I like to go running back. I like to go ahead and get a top-notch running back in round 1 and spin around and get an Austin Eckler or Joe Mixon or someone like that in round 2.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Eric, you bring up a good point with Joe Mixon. But I'm one of those guys. I don't know. Maybe you're not one of those guys. Are you one of those guys, just like I am, that when I draft a player high or I draft a player and he does me, he gets hurt, and I feel like you say do dirty, but it's not the player's fault that they get hurt. But like you didn't get what you wanted out of that player when you drafted him. Like Kenny Golladay this year, I drafted him 3rd round and I got absolutely nothing for him, so I'm not going to touch him again. Some people will stay off of Barkley because of his injury press. So are you one of those guys that you have a list of players that are like, nope, I'm not taking you no more?
No, I've never been a big, do not draft guys like on a list because, a lot of people, it's funny, like in fantasy and some of your league mates, may be this way too, since I know you're kind of plugging, taking down your home league is you'll have people for where they'll look in the rear view mirror when providing analysis, but never looking forward. And so they'll just kind of think back, oh, here's what happened with this player last year, et cetera. But, you got to think about what they're going to do for this year. I mean, they're paying Joe Mixon like a lot of money. They gave him the extension that he was looking for. You got a young quarterback there, Joe Burrow, surrounded by receiving weapons. They have to fix the offensive line, so they're going to make some additions there. And he's going to be in a position to thrive. Plus, granted, hey, he's a year older, but he didn't have that many opportunities last year. So his body's going to be fresh. It's going to feel good. It just kind of makes me think back where you think of perception. I'll kind of close the thought with this is, I think back, I can't remember the exact year, but the time frame I'm talking about is everyone's perception of like DeMarco Murray before he had that monster season in Dallas, where I think he finishes like a top 3 like PPR running back, behind that Dallas offensive line. He was just like a league winner. And so I remember because his ADP, I think in 10 or 12 team leagues, I can't recall, it's probably yearly similar, was I think it was like in the 3rd round because people were concerned about like his injury history. And so it was really like the perfect time for him because, he was healthy. He lasted the entire season. He got a ton of opportunities. Now, granted, it could be said, hey, after that season, he was never the same player. But I'm like, he was a league winner for that year and a really, really nice value. But, if you were looking completely in the past saying, okay, well, I'm not going to do DeMarco Murray because you may miss out on some opportunities. to draft players.
You got to keep all options open. There's only
Exactly.
one player that I will not draft, and that is Amari Cooper. And that's because I am that man's curse. That's a personal thing. Every time I play him, he gets 5 or less points. He doesn't get 10. He doesn't give me 15. He doesn't do average. He gets 5 or less points. When he's on my bench, he gets 30 points. And I promise you, if I switch it, he's going to switch with it. No matter what. He could have 3 straight amazing weeks. I put him in 5 points. Keep him in 5 points. Take him out 35 points. I've had him on my dynasty team for 3 seasons, and no one will take him on my hands. I'm about to just trade him for nothing, just to help his career because I'm his curse or something.
It is what it is. Well, Eric, I appreciate you coming on. You've been a great guest. You entered the Warzone, and you did great, and you're welcome back anytime. You guys can find him at Eric N. Moody on Twitter and ericnmoody.com. Right? Anywhere else you want them to go find you?
Yeah, I would say the other place would be at The Athletic. I'll continue to have content there as a staff writer, and I'll end up linking up with Jake Seeley and Nando for this regular season on the Athletic Fantasy Football podcast. But also I've partnered up with Todd Burrows with the Run the Daylight podcast, and so we record every Friday night, and so you can kind of check the audio and the video stream, of that pod as well. But reach out on Twitter. Always happy to help, and also very active on Clubhouse too, if you're on that app as well. So, but gentlemen, hey, I appreciate the invite. Always good to talk about fantasy football, and I look forward to the next time.
Oh yeah.
Heck yeah. Mike, see you on Friday night.